Hey, hello, we are here to do the mid-year freakout tag. I have never done this tag or any tag, I don't think, so I thought it would be fun. And we're gonna try and get through this before the heat becomes absolutely unbearable because I am recording this on the 4th and it's gonna be a hot one today. So let's get into it. The first question is, how has your 2023 reading year gone so far? And this is a kind of loaded question. I mean, it's not a loaded question. It's a very straightforward question. My reading feels a little weird to me this year, and I think it is because I'm in transition in a lot of different ways. I obviously have gone through a job loss and starting a new job this year. I just feel a little disconnected in some ways. I thought that having that time to myself, well, not really to myself because I was on the job hunt, I would be reading more because the last time I was laid off, I read a lot. And I also moved into a job where I was listening to audiobooks constantly when I started that job. So I feel in some ways kind of distant from my reading life, probably because I haven't been reading a book straight through in one sitting in the way that historically I am used to. And part of it is those life changes. Part of it, honestly, is this channel. I have been focusing a lot of time here because I'm excited by it. I'm excited to talk books. I'm excited to build community here, but that obviously undeniably takes actual time. And so that is time then that I'm not spending reading. And so I just have to accept that that is part of the bargain, and so I am losing those reading hours. So between some of those life shifts, those focus shifts, spending time with my family and friends, I haven't spent as much time just like solely in a book for nonstop hours, you know, reading the whole thing at once. I did have one of those moments last weekend reading a Lisa Kleypas, a backlist Lisa Kleypas, because there are no frontlist Lisa Kleypas titles this year, and I kind of regained some of that magic of just like reading a book straight through. And I'm having that a little bit with Happy Place right now. I'm reading Happy Place, and not so much because I have still been having to jump in and out of it with commuting and, you know, reading at home or reading at one of my favorite restaurants with my Santa Fe salad. You know, I'm going in and out, but the text feels really approachable. It's a nice summer read, and so that's helping me concentrate. You may have heard me talk before with books about when I have trouble connecting with a book, I may not like it, but I recognize lots of other people like it. And one of the ways I'm able to kind of articulate that kind of very personal distinction is that I feel like as a reader, I'm being kept at an arm's distance. There's something kind of clouding that for me. And that's kind of how I'm feeling about my reading life a little bit this year. I am in it when I'm in it, right? I'm reading some great things. I just feel more distant from it than I have historically. So I'm still reading a lot of great books. I'm reading a lot of books by any other person's standard, granted. But for me, I do feel like there is a lot I haven't gotten to yet this year, and that's probably part of feeling that disconnect, is feeling like there are so many other titles I want to read, I want to get to, and not having that same level of focus, and a certain level of kind of recovering from burnout in some ways, from my previous job, from kind of like all of the emotional tempestuousness of last year with losing 2 close family members within like a 6-month span. So it's just kind of getting back into the game in some ways. So an undeniably good reading year so far, but not necessarily the reading year of my dreams so far, and it goes back to me really not trying to gauge myself against others or even myself, because I haven't been as in it. I feel a little disconnected in that way too. I'm gonna read what I'm interested in, period, but I'm used to being a little bit more up on what's buzzy and reading what's buzzy, and granted, I am still reading buzzy books. I'm reading Happy Place right now, I'm gonna be starting Yellowface soon, but I'm not necessarily reading the things that are really taking off on places like TikTok, where a lot of these conversations have been growing lately. So yeah, I guess that's my reading life so far this year. The next question is, what is the best book you've read so far in 2023? And this is difficult, both because I've read some great books in 2023 and because there are a lot of books I haven't yet read in 2023 that I think are going to make this list. Now, if you are interested in me doing like a top 10 or whatever top books of the year so far at some point, let me know. But I think undeniably my favorite book of the year so far is Unsurprisingly, Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. This just has such a scope to it. It was both familiar and completely surprising at the same time. It was twisted, it was dark, it had an unexpected connection to one of my favorite of her short stories, From Things We Lost in the Fire. It just has an epic kind of scope to it. I've obviously talked about all of this in more detail in the Feature Friday for this book, but it was just so interesting seeing how one of my favorite short story writers translates to a larger, more epic work. I was excited that we finally got this translated into English. I was excited that we continued the team up between Mariana Enriquez and Megan McDowell. It was just a stellar combination. I definitely think that this book, well, honestly, I think you can read this book all year. You want to say it's like a great fall book, but I think it also has this like great quality for the summer because it's kind of oppressive, it's kind of claustrophobic in some ways, and I think that like midsummer stale heat is going to have that same kind of energy, that same kind of claustrophobia. I don't know, it either makes sense or I'm completely full of shit. I'll let you be the judge. And then the next question is best sequel you've read in 2023. And I don't feel like I've read as many sequels in 2023 this year, especially because there were two books that were of my favorites of last year, Daughter of the Moon Goddess and River Enchanted, that had sequels come out at the end of last year that I didn't get to because of the HarperCollins writer's strike and wanting to be able to talk about them, but then they've kind of gotten shuffled down the TBR since then. Also because my memory of things isn't what it once was. I used to be able to pick up a sequel in an anticipated series years out and still remember the first book in that series or whatever book had come before the series itself so clearly. I talked about this before, but when I was in high school, one of my mom's good friends who taught English for decades and was subbing in one of my English classes, and we were close enough that I called her Auntie Mary at the time, and I mean, I guess I still do, but she asked me, she looked at my reading log and she was like, "You remember all of this?" And I was like, yes, because it seemed like such a silly question to me at the time. I read it, of course I remembered it. Now that's a much different thing, and I've had to kind of make my peace with that, and I think that might be part of the fuzziness too. But at this point, I've read thousands of books. And then on top of that, I am much older, and we've been through a very stressful last couple of years. So all that to say, I don't feel like I'm getting to series as well as I should or have historically. But I still read, and this may be a little bit of recency bias as well, but this is a fantastic book, An Island Princess Starts a Scandal by Adriana Herrera, sequel to A Caribbean Heiress in Paris. So it's part of the Las Leonas series. I have a video, a Feature Friday, on both A Caribbean Heiress in Paris and An Island Princess Starts a Scandal, but it is just a wonderful, vibrant historical romance series, and I'm really, really loving it. And that's it. I think you should read it, but if you want more, go back and watch those videos. We are barely into this, and I feel like I'm already sweating, which is not a great sign for the day. So let's move it on to the next question, which is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. If you have seen any of my monthly anticipated videos, you know that I average in those videos anywhere from 20 to 30 books a month generally. So this is going to be a lot. We're gonna go through just some of the most pressing things I have in my physical vicinity. This is not even considering the things that I have on my Kobo where I can kind of pretend they're not there, even though I still want to read them. So Yellowface, I obviously want to read. I've started. Deep as the Sky, Red as the Sea, want to read. Delicious Monsters, The Foxglove King, The God of Endings, A Manual for How to Love Us, The Fairy Bargain of Prospect Hill. Yeah, that's the title of this book. Flux, White Dog, White Cat, Black Dog, Madalena and the Dark, The Adventures of Amina al-Sharafi. This is just the beginning, but this is also a lot of books. So we will see. I need to get through these. If you have anything in these ridiculous piles that I have now made a mess of that you would like me to prioritize, let me know. But I make no promises because I am very much still a mood reader, which is also why I don't really do many reading challenges or like themed readings, even though I always have ideas for them, and some of that is just being able to complete things in a timely fashion as well. So maybe we'll get more of that in the future. Maybe this is a ridiculous tangent that doesn't matter, but those are just a sampling of the titles that I would like to still get to and have anticipated this year. If you would like more, I will refer you to any of my monthly anticipated videos and give you the knowledge that since then, since any of those videos, I have inevitably come across more titles in any given month that I also want to read, including that I'm realizing it's not in this stack because I had to take it back to the library because I didn't get to it in time and then put it back on hold, Chain Gang All-Stars, which I've still been hearing great buzz about. So there are so many books this year. And for the books still to come, most anticipated releases for the second half of the year is the next question. I think it says most anticipated release, but you know I'm going to cheat. So immediately, in that it's coming out in July, so we've technically already mentioned it, but Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Clearly, it's Silvia Moreno Garcia, it's dealing with occultism in some way, I'm in. And then What Stalks Among Us by Sarah Hallowell, author of A Dark and Starless Forest, which I have talked about, and I have disclosed before every time I talk about this book because I think it's important to disclose. I am a friend of Sarah, or Sarah is a college friend, I should say, so there is a little bias here, but I have loved Sarah's writing since college, and granted, I didn't get to read a whole lot of it in college because we were in separate majors. We came into each other's lives through the honors college freshman year, and then through shouting at Glee and watching Glee together and getting angry at Glee things, and then you know how college works. But she has a book coming out this fall, What Stalks Among Us, that I am so excited about. It involves a haunted corn maze, and it just sounds so Indiana to the point where I was really lobbying for an Indiana Beach jingle reference in this book somewhere. If you are from Indiana, you know that there's a great divide in small Indiana theme parks, in that the northern half of the state really goes more toward Indiana Beach and the southern half of the state goes more toward Santa Claus Land. I used to get in good-natured and heated arguments with my roommates about the superiority of any given theme park. Indiana Beach is admittedly working at a disadvantage because Santa Claus Land gives out free sunscreen and beverages, but Indiana Beach does have the jingle and the Cornball Express, so you've got to really consider your options. But I'm really looking forward to this book. I think it's going to be a great fall spooky book with Sarah's great voice. And then probably one of my more anticipated books of the second half of the year is Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab, which is the continuation of A Darker Shade of Magic series. Now, I haven't looked a whole lot into this book. I am admittedly still kind of nervous about this book as much as I am excited, because that series means so much to me and I haven't reread it in a long time, so I don't know how it holds up to me as a reader today versus me as a reader in my early 20s, but as my friend Kristen can attest at me crying over an Ostrobar's inscription in a signed copy after we went to a pop-up signing in Chicago years and years ago, this series I love. And I remember so clearly buying the first book. It was the first series I had downloaded what I thought was an arc on NetGalley, and it turned out this wasn't a full arc, it was just a preview. I don't usually read previews, whether they're free, they're on NetGalley, they're just like on some random site as a kind of tease for the book, because I want to read the whole book. But I was so excited about this book. I read the preview while sitting eating a personal pan pizza at a Monocle's, and I loved it so much. I remember going to the downtown Barnes & Noble on State Street, the one that's a college bookstore technically, though they always took my membership. I've never quite figured that out because I would always present my membership at the Barnes & Noble college bookstores and they would always apply it. So I don't know, but I remember looking for the book. I couldn't find it. I asked a bookseller and they were like, oh, I wonder why we didn't have any of this book. Well, the first printing sold out. So I don't know. I love the series and it's obviously connected to a very particular time in my life. And I need to speed this up. So next question is, biggest disappointment of 2023 so far? The London Seance Society by Sarah Penner. I wanted to like this so much because I'd heard such good things about The Lost Apothecary, which I haven't read. I was very interested in the subject matter because I'm interested in that kind of like occultism of the Victorian age. And this just had so much promise in terms of its characters, its point of view, its themes, and it just really let me down. It was a pretty lackluster mystery. It didn't really feel like it knew what it was saying. Its kind of way into the story was very odd to me. It was very lopsided. I didn't understand the points of view we were getting. I didn't understand what we were saying necessarily, or even the mystery angle of things. If it was going to be more mystery focused, I didn't feel like the mystery was a mystery. And so I just didn't really feel like it knew what it was doing. I didn't love the writing style. I talk about it a lot more in depth in a Feature Friday. And then the next question is the biggest surprise of 2023 so far. Now, I feel like the intention of this question is a book that surprised you, but I read all of these because I went in wanting to like them, expecting to like them, so it's not like I was like, oh, I am surprised by how much I liked this necessarily. So I'm thinking of this in context of the moment that surprised me the most, and I think that so far for me, that is when I realized in Our Share of Night that there were connections to the short story Adela's House from Things We Lost in the Fire, just because I really liked that short story, and it obviously went in a much different direction than the short story, but was still kind of rooted in that short story in many ways. And I really enjoy those kind of connections for authors where you can see the kind of impetus of an idea in one form of storytelling and the way that that sparks something to be used later or clearly inspires something down the line. So I guess I will go with that as my biggest surprise. And then the next question is favorite new author, new to you, or debut. This is going to be a new to me. It is Victor Lavelle because of how much I loved Lone Women. I have mentioned before that I need to go back and read the rest of his work based on how much I loved Lone Women, and part of the reason I picked up Lone Women is because I was intrigued by the premise, yes, but I was intrigued by the premise in combination with having heard really good things about his work prior to that, so I need to swing back. But so far, that is my favorite new discovery in terms of authors for the year. Number 9, newest fictional crush. I think I'm going to go with Roman Kitt from Divine Rivals. One, Divine Rivals has really taken off as a book this year in a way that I didn't really realize, I don't think, because it feels so personal while you're reading it. You're like, oh, this book is for me, even if Divine Rivals really wasn't for me at the outset, in the sense that it wasn't what I gravitate to, in that it was really kind of digging into a fantasy angle for like World War I. And as I've mentioned ad nauseum, I don't necessarily gravitate first to World War narratives, period, regardless of the war, but this drew me in. And one of the primary draws for this, unsurprisingly, probably for most people, was the romance angle, and it didn't let me down. I loved that kind of reversal of who we thought Roman was at the beginning of the book, getting to know him a little bit more intimately, and then watching him follow Iris to the front, watching that real sacrifice from him in the book, watching the way they grew together, that young adult version of The Guy Falls First. It was just really delicious. I loved it. I'm very interested to see where book 2 is gonna go, because I anticipate we're going to torture them a little bit, but definitely would put him there. It feels a little weird because I feel like I should be picking something more age appropriate, so I want to be clear that I'm like drawn to the feelings and the romance in this. I don't necessarily, like, I'm not envisioning myself with Roman Kitt. I'm sure well, I guess the other anticipated book I have for the second half of the year, how did I forget this? Knockout by Sarah MacLean, the next in the Hell's Bells series. I anticipate Tommy will probably be my book boyfriend by the end of the year, but we will see. And there are more romances coming out. That's one of the things that I personally am behind on for the year, are some of the romances from my romance go-tos, particularly my historical romance go-tos. So that's mostly just me giving a caveat to the fact that my book boyfriend for the first half of the year is from a young adult title. It's more the feelings in the book. In the same way that I watched Queen Charlotte and was drawn to the story and the romance there, and watched the internet enamored of the actor who played King George, who was very handsome. But I also had this moment where I was watching where I was like, he looks young to me. Number 10 is a book that made you cry. I know that I've cried at a book this year. I don't really have a record of it. Like, I haven't tracked it mentally like I would have in the past. I assume Divine Rivals probably made me cry. I assume that there was probably a spot in Our Share of Night where I cried, and I assume that anything else that made me cry probably was a romance, because for some reason I can really get drawn into the earnestness there. I also probably cried, and I'm not necessarily proud of this, while rereading Daisy Jones and the Six. And I say I'm not proud of it because it was probably at the end, and one, I knew what the end was, and two, I have a very complicated opinion of the end of that book because it feels, one, kind of emotionally manipulative, and two, I don't really like the maneuvering of it where it's like, okay, well, now everything's so easy and these two belong together and blah, 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 and what does that say for the rest of the book? I don't know, that's a larger discussion. But yeah, we'll just assume that I've cried. And then the next question is book you saw on TikTok and regret reading. And I feel like this is a very loaded question. For me personally, the answer is none, because I haven't really read any of the BookTok popular books for the sake of reading them because they're popular on BookTok, if that makes sense. Or I feel like it's kind of leaning in. I feel like this is a loaded question because I feel like it's a setup for the TikTok lied to me conversation. And I feel like that's a very loaded conversation because yes, there is a lot of hype that can build on hype on TikTok, but I think any book that builds up an amount of hype has the potential to let down a reader, and people are going to experience books differently. And we have to acknowledge that there are a lot of readers that are getting back into reading or new to reading on TikTok. And I'm not saying that to talk down to anybody, but there are a lot of hyped up books that I haven't liked. There are a lot of hyped up books that I think are just bad, but there are a lot of books conversely that I love that people think are bad. And so it's really subjective, and we could go into like the nitty gritty of like, oh, the writing's just bad. And I think that there are some valid conversations there. I don't know that I've read any of those books. I am currently reading Happy Place by Emily Henry, which is a big TikTok title. However, it's a big crossover title, and I would be reading it anyway because I've enjoyed Henry's crossover into the adult sphere from her young adult work. Now, I still haven't read People We Meet on Vacation, so take that with a grain of salt, but I have seen more mixed reviews for Happy People, so that may be something, but I think it's very much a matter of personal preference, so I don't foresee it, even if for some reason I don't end up liking it, being in this category. So I guess this question reads a little bit more loaded to me personally, especially because I haven't really read a lot of TikTok recommended books because my own TBR is so large. If there's overlap there, wonderful. At the same time, TikTok has recommended me some books that I plan to get to, like I Keep My Exoskeletons to Myself, but I don't know that like those are like the big titles. I feel like this is a question that is setting up for a takedown of a hugely popular TikTok book that I just can't do. I do feel like the big buzzy book right now is Fourth Wing. If you have thoughts on that, let me know. If you think it's worth my time, let me know. I do have a hold on it at the library to just kind of see, but you've seen my TBR stacks. So if you have opinions on whether or not you think I will like it, or you want my opinions on the book, let me know. Okay, next question is most beautiful book you bought this year. The most beautiful book I bought this year was not published this year and was not for myself because, as you know, I have cut back on my book buying a little bit. And when I think of this question, I think of like special editions, gilded edges, things that I don't do as often. I will order the Waterstones exclusive editions of the Amari and the Knight Brothers series because I love those books, but I don't like rush out to buy exclusive editions of books unless I was already planning to buy that book. I could see it being a determining factor or influencing a purchasing decision, and I think it is one of the smartest moves publishers can make in terms of boosting sales and kind of increasing the value proposition of like a hardcover versus like a paperback that you can throw in your bag and take around with you and kind of beat up and not care about it. But with the price of books right now, there is something to be said about a beautiful edition. And of course, there are these conversations that circle about like the aesthetics of books versus like the functionality of reading a book. But personally, I don't think that those are mutually exclusive, and neither is that part of the conversation of the book that I want to talk about because I bought the book Night Owl by Christopher Denise. I want to give huge credit to Three Avenues Bookstore who had this on display, and I was looking for children's books because I was buying for my friend's 1-year-old before we were told not to bring presents. I'm still gonna bring presents. I had adults in my childhood that were the ones that would gift me books at every opportunity, and I am bound and determined to be that adult. And it's been a while since I've been on the picture book scene. I used to love looking at new picture books when I was a bookseller and took a lot of pride in being someone that was well versed in the department for recommendations. And this, I just love the art here. This really reminds me of picture books when I was a kid and just like the art style. Like I like the art style that's become really popular over the last decade or so, don't get me wrong. There are lots of wonderfully cute books, but the illustrations here are just so cute. And like we've got a dragon. Who doesn't want a dragon, whether they're eating tacos or not? But here, our dragon eats something different, spoiler alert, but maybe in the same vein. So I really love this. Also, I love knights, I love owls. This is just an adorable book. This was also a Caldecott honor book, which is surprisingly hard to say, but is no surprise. Number 13 is what are the books you need to read by the end of the year, which feels like the same question as what books or what new releases haven't you got to yet. They are one and the same. I guess other books that I need to read before the end of the year, I'm going to need to reread Romancing Mr. Bridgerton to talk about season 3 of Bridgerton. I am debating rereading the A Darker Shade of Magic series in preparation for Threads of Power, the new book. But other than that, it's really, I'm just gonna try and get through as many titles as I can. And then the next 4 questions are channel related, which is interesting because I don't think I've really talked about the channel on the channel before. So the first question is favorite video you've made so far in 2023. And I'm going to take Feature Fridays out of the equation because I really like talking about books, obviously, but there's a little bit more of a formula to that, regardless of how I dig into the thing. But I think that the discussions I've most enjoyed having so far this year are 2 videos. One, my video going into the idea of bad ratings and ratings in general in relation to that circular conversation that we always get from authors who view 1-star, 2-star as bad, and like what all of that is. I mean, obviously 1-star, 2-star are kind of bad ratings if we're looking at a star scale, but regardless, I go into all of that discussion in the video itself, but it's mostly framed around the idea of bad reviews, the kind of reaction from some authors to bad reviews, but why bad reviews are still valuable. The other video conversation I really enjoyed having was the discussion around whether publishing as an industry is reacting to consumer desires, consumer wants, what it sees from readers and what readers want, or if it's forcing readers to adapt to what they want from the industry or from readership. I think the answer to that question is fairly obvious, but it was fun to dig into, especially when thinking of all that's actually possible within the space. And then a video you thought would flop but did well. Now, all of this is presented with the caveat that I am a very small channel, so well to me looks much different than to other creators. But I didn't really expect my Shadow and Bone season 2 review to get much traction, probably because my season 1 didn't get like a whole lot of traction. It got a decent amount for me, no question. But within the larger landscape of Shadow and Bone reactions and the fact that the landscape is so large for that property, I didn't really expect to get much traction there, but I did get more than I expected for sure. I got a couple thousand views on that video, which I was not expecting. In a similar vein, I did an unhaul, which I feel is a kind of Booktube standard, and it got like hundreds of views. I think it's just shy of 500 maybe, which again, doesn't sound like a lot, but for me, especially at the beginning of the year, is actually quite a lot. So outside of like my Bridgerton content, which obviously does pretty decently, especially for the size of my channel, those videos were kind of like unexpected boosts in the sense that I enjoyed making them. I obviously made them because I wanted to talk about these things, but I was just pleasantly surprised in the amount of traffic they got. The next question is any upcoming videos you're excited to make? Yes, I am excited to make and talk books all the time. I am obviously, I think, excited to talk about Bridgerton season 3. I try to toe the line, obviously, because there are so many things I'm interested in talking about. I don't want to talk just Bridgerton all the time, but I am unquestionably excited about talking about it when that time comes. And then the last question is any channel goals by the end of the year? And yes, I often struggle with talking about my goals because I don't want to seem motivated by that side of things, because again, I am just here to connect with people about books, to talk about books, to chat about the books I'm excited about, but I would also be lying if I said I wasn't looking at that 1,000 goal. As of this recording, we are not there yet. By the time this goes up, we will either be very, very close or potentially over. So that's kind of my big goal for the year and has been my kind of big goal for the year. After that, it's probably just a goal to increase interaction. I'm awful at asking for interaction because it feels like an imposition. It's like, I trust you, you know what you're about, you'll like if you want. But at the same time, when I actually mention liking, subscribing, commenting, I do get more of that. So I guess I will just be better about that. So I guess just continuing to be genuine, to let things build organically. I have been absolutely blown away by the people who have been popping into my comment sections as well. So thank you to everyone who has been here. The idea that some of you have been here for an extended period of time absolutely baffles my mind, because I'm just sitting in my apartment talking to myself. So truly thank you to those who join in on the conversation, even if it is simply listening to me talk. So with that, we are through the official wrap-up questions. That's where we're kind of sitting for the year so far, at this kind of midpoint. If you would like me to talk through a more comprehensive list of my favorites of the year so far in order to be able to compare that to where we sit by the end of the year, let me know. But at the same time, I feel like that may be more evident through the Feature Fridays as I've talked about them, but if we want to do that in one more centralized location, let me know. And I would also be really interested to hear your responses to some of these questions. What's your favorite of the year? What's your least favorite of the year? How is your reading year going in general? You know, we just went through all the questions. But as I just kind of finished saying, thank you so much for being here and caring at all about what I have to say about the matter. Like, subscribe, comment, however your heart leads you. Read something good, and yeah, bye.